The Crimson Gauntlet's reputation was not merely famous. It was legendary, the kind of legendary that transcended advertising, that spread through the galaxy on pure word of mouth, carried by traders and soldiers and travelers who had witnessed it firsthand and needed the world to know. From the merchant hubs of the Antar cluster to the military installations orbiting Proxima, every sentient being with any cultural awareness knew the name. Warriors came here to forge themselves, to test the limits of what their bodies could endure, to claim the title of champion and the prize of 1 million credits that came with it. Most left in medical pods. Some left in storage containers, their remains heading home for whatever burial rites their species practiced. The rules were elegant in their brutality. 3 rounds. Survive all 3. Claim victory in the prize. Fail in any one of them, and Station Helix 9's medical facilities would do their best, though Vector had never actually verified their success rate, because most fighters didn't need doctors. They needed undertakers. Round 1 typically featured environmental hazards, collapsing terrain, rising floodwaters, toxic atmospheres, all pack predators selected for maximum lethality. Round 2 introduced armed combat against seasoned gladiators, professional fighters who had survived dozens of matches and knew exactly how to make an opponent's final moments educational. Round 3 was different. Round 3 was special. That was when Gromoth the Destroyer entered the arena. All 12 feet of him, all 4 arms, all the armored fury and biological weaponry that made him the most feared combatant in 7-star systems and had kept him undefeated across 73 consecutive matches. No opponent had lasted longer than 4 minutes against him. Most lasted considerably less. The humans, though, they never made it that far. They never had to face Gromoth, because the predators in round 1 handled that particular problem quickly and permanently. Killerith, the station's chief bookkeeper, scuttled across the observation deck on 6 clicking legs, his Sithan compound eyes gleaming with barely suppressed excitement. He was a creature built for numbers, for probability, for the precise poetry of odds, and tonight those odds were more magnificent than anything he had processed in years. "Master Vectar," he said, his voice high and rapid, "the wagering is unprecedented. We have received bets from 18 different systems. The sheer volume has forced us to expand our processing capacity twice in the past hour. Everyone wants to see the human fail." He paused for dramatic effect, savoring the number about to leave his mandibles. The house stand to clear 7 million credits when she dies. When, Vector agreed, emphasizing the word with deliberate satisfaction. Not if. When. He leaned back in his observation chair, rolling the certainty around in his mind like a warm stone. Remind me of the previous humans. Killerith. I want to hold the record clearly in my mind tonight. The bookkeeper pulled up the holographic files with practiced efficiency, each case appearing in vivid detail. First human, 5 cycles ago. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, crushed by a Grothian boulder beast within 40 seconds. He never saw it coming. The creature dropped from the arena ceiling before Webb had even oriented himself. Killerith swiped to the next file. Second human, 3 cycles ago. Specialist Jackson Torres, poisoned by Vendak spine crawlers. He lasted 2 minutes and 12 seconds, which was actually impressive, considering how many there were. He ran well. Another swipe. Third human, 1 cycle ago. Sergeant Kim Okoy, torn apart by a pack of Shreers. 9 to 7 seconds. She fought harder than the other 2, I will give her that, but the outcome was never really in question. Vector nodded slowly, savoring each data point like a connoisseur reviewing a favorite vintage. And what, in your professional assessment, makes humans so thoroughly unsuited for combat in an arena like this? Killerith's answer came with the smooth confidence of someone reciting well-known facts, because they were. Every school system in the civilized galaxy covered basic xenobiology. Humans were a standard cautionary example. Their home world, Earth, has a surface gravity of 9.8 meters per second squared. Adequate, but unremarkable. They evolved as persistence hunters, meaning they are designed for long-distance endurance, not explosive combat. They have no natural weapons of consequence, no armor, no regenerative capabilities worth noting. Their reaction times are adequate at best, their bone density is poor, and their skin provides essentially no protection against bladed or thermal weapons. The bookkeeper spread his claws in a gesture of philosophical resignation. They are, Biologically speaking, the bottom tier of warrior species in the known galaxy. The database is quite clear on this. Current odds. Vector asked. 3,000. 400 to 1 against her surviving round 1, Keelan replied. And I consider those odds generous. Regulatory requirements mandate at least a theoretical possibility of survival, or I would have set them considerably higher. Vector glanced at the countdown clock above the arena gates. 5 minutes. He settled into his observation chair, folded his upper arms across his chest, and allowed himself a rare smile. This would be entertaining. Brief, but entertaining. The arena floor was a circular pit 200 meters in diameter, its sand raked to smooth perfection before each match. The surrounding galleries rose in steep tiers, reinforced against the kind of impact that arena combat occasionally produced, and tonight every single one of the 3,000 available seats was filled to capacity. Word had spread fast through Helix 9's corridors and commercial quarters. Another human. Another inevitable demonstration of why Earth's inhabitants should stick to their quiet corner of the galaxy and leave the serious business of combat to species who were built for it. Beings had come from across the station, merchants, soldiers, dock workers, dignitaries, all united by the specific pleasure of watching certainty confirm itself. The crowd roared as Raina Cross stepped through the contestants' gate and onto the sand. She didn't pause at the threshold. She didn't look up at the galleries, didn't acknowledge the wall of noise crashing down at her from every direction. A group of Keelan merchants in the upper gallery threw food scraps toward the arena floor, and she didn't even glance in their direction. She simply walked to the center of the pit, stood still, and waited. Her hands hung loose at her sides. Her breathing was slow and measured. She looked. Vector thought with something between irritation and reluctant fascination, like someone who had found the whole situation mildly tedious. He activated his microphone, letting his voice cut through the crowd's chaos with the precision of a blade. Beings of Helix 9, honored guests from across the 7 systems, welcome to the Crimson Gauntlet, where legends are made and pretenders are reminded of their limitations. He let the pause stretch, milking the moment with 3 centuries of showmanship behind it. Tonight, we have a special entertainment. A human has volunteered to face round 1. He allowed himself a theatrical pause. Let her see if she lasts longer than the previous specimens. The laughter was deafening. It rolled down from the galleries in waves, filling the arena with the sound of thousands of beings sharing one enormous joke. Vector pressed the release mechanism. 6 reinforced gates slid open across the arena with a hydraulic hiss that silenced the laughter almost instantly, replaced by a different kind of energy, something electric, anticipatory, and faintly uneasy. The shrieks emerged. These were not ordinary predators, not something plucked from a manageable ecosystem and given a bit of space to roam. Vendax Prime was a nightmare world where evolution had stripped away everything soft and gentle over millions of years, leaving behind creatures that were essentially living weapons. Shriya stood 7 feet tall on 4 razor-clawed legs, their bodies plated in overlapping chitin that deflected most blade strikes, their jaws capable of shearing through reinforced steel with sustained pressure. They hunted in packs with a terrifying, almost eerie coordination, communicating through subsonic pulses that their prey could never hear. Their name came from the high-pitched scream they released in the moment before they killed, a sound so precisely calibrated that it triggered paralytic fear responses in most prey species. 6 of them, against 1 human who was barely 6 feet tall and had no armor. Vector leaned forward in his chair, settling in for what he expected would be a very short performance. The shrieks fanned out as they entered the arena, moving with the fluid precision of a unit that had hunted together many times. They circled Raina at the edges of their comfortable range, their movements synchronized without any visible signal, the subsonic coordination working beneath the threshold of conscious perception. Pack hunters always tested their prey first. They looked for the involuntary fear responses that told them everything they needed to know, the flinch, the backward step, the elevated breathing, the micro-tremors that preceded a panicked run. Every prey species showed it. It was biology. It was inevitable. Raina Cross did not move. She stood with her feet planted shoulder-width apart, her hands still loose at her sides, and watched the circling shrieks with the expression of a biologist studying something mildly interesting through a glass case. Her heart rate, displayed on Vector's medical monitoring feed, was elevated but controlled. She wasn't afraid. Or if she was, she had buried the fear so completely that her body had stopped getting the message. The Alpha Shriya, largest of the six, its chitin plates darker and more heavily scarred, screamed. The sound tore through the arena like a blade, and Vector saw several beings in the front row physically recoil. Then it lunged, all four legs driving it forward in a burst of explosive speed, closing the distance to Raina in less than a second. What happened next made Vector's four eyes go wide simultaneously. Raina moved toward it. Not sideways, not backward. She moved forward, directly into the Shriya's charge, closing the distance even faster than the creature had anticipated. And then she dropped a clean, practice fall that put her under the creature's slashing foreclaws, and drove her fist upward into its throat when impact that echoed across the arena like a gunshot. The Shriya's killing scream cut off mid-note. The creature stumbled, its front legs folding, choking and disoriented, crashing sideways into the sand. The crowd went absolutely silent. The other 5 Shriyas attacked simultaneously. This was the pack's coordinated response, not a panic, but a tactical escalation, the same maneuver that had ended prey much larger and more powerful than this small human. 3 from the left, 2 from the right, converging from angles that made simultaneous defense impossible. Raina twisted in a way that seemed to use physics differently than physics was supposed to work. She caught the foreleg of the nearest Shriya mid-swing, absorbed its momentum rather than fighting it, and used the creature's own weight to swing it in a tight arc directly into a second Shriya coming from her right. Both creatures crashed to the sand in a tangled heap of snapping jaws and flailing legs. "That is not possible," Morcus whispered beside Vector, his voice stripped of all humor. "Master, she is too fast. Humans are not that fast. The database says." "I know what the database says," Vector replied quietly. He couldn't look away from the arena floor. A third Shriya lunged for Raina's shoulder, jaws snapping for the kind of grip that ended prey quickly. She turned into the attack, not away from it, which was what every survival instinct in the universe should have demanded, but directly into it, and jammed her forearm between the creature's teeth before its jaws could fully close. The chitin-reinforced jaws bit down with a pressure that could shear steel. Vector winced, bracing for the sound of shattering bone and tearing flesh. Instead, Raina's free hand shot forward, gripped the Shriya's lower jaw, and pulled. The crack that followed, sharp, definitive, final, made 3 beings in the front row look away. She released the creature and stepped back from it as it collapsed, moving on before it had even finished falling. "Check her gravity rating," Vector said, his voice stripped of its earlier warmth. "Pull up her full biological profile. Now!" Kilaritha's claws flew across his datapad. Earth standard is 9.8 meters per second squared. "Master, that is confirmed. She should be weaker than this. She should be slower. She should be dead," Vector finished. "She should be dead." But she was not. The remaining 3 Shriyas, creatures that had been genetically selected for aggression, that had never in their existence known anything resembling hesitation, began to back away from Raina Cross. It was subtle at first, a slight increase in the distance they maintained, a different quality to their circling. Then it became unmistakable. The Shriyas were retreating. Raina walked toward them, not running, walking, with the unhurried confidence of someone who already knew how this ended. The Shriya scattered, their coordination dissolving completely. One bolted for its entry gate. Raina caught it by the tail without breaking stride and slammed it into the arena wall with enough force that cracked spiderwebbed across the reinforced stone. For minutes and 17 seconds after round 1 had begun, all 6 Shriyas lay motionless on the sand. Raina Cross stood in the center of the arena, breathing steadily, rolling her shoulders to work out what appeared to be mild stiffness. She wasn't winded. She wasn't trembling. She looked up at Vector's observation window, found the camera, and smiled. It was not an aggressive smile. It was not triumphant or theatrical. It was quiet and patient, the smile of someone who had been trying to tell you something for a long time and had finally found a way to make you understand. The crowd remained completely silent for 4 full seconds. Then the observation deck erupted. Morcus was frantically pulling up biological scan results, his hands moving faster than Vector had ever seen them. 3 arena officials argued loudly over a copy of the Combat Regulations Manual. Kilarit stood frozen beside his datapad, staring at it with a hollow expression of someone watching a financial nightmare unfold in real time. "Give me everything," Vector said, his voice controlled, each word placed carefully. "Full biological scan. Complete environmental analysis. I want to understand exactly what just happened on that floor. The medical scanner's result appeared on his primary display within moments. Vector read them once, then again, more slowly, then a third time, because the numbers still didn't make any sense. Bone density, 3 times higher than standard human baseline. Muscle fiber composition, significantly more efficient energy conversion than recorded human parameters. Reaction time, faster than database averages by approximately 40%. Cardiovascular function, operating at levels consistent with peak stress. However, subject heart rate remains only slightly elevated. This can't be right, Morka said, his voice cracking on the last word. The data says she should be normal, average, weak. Look at this, Vector said, zooming in on a specific cluster of readings. Her musculature is under constant compression. Her body is actively working against something, like resistance, like strain, but she's not exerting herself. It's as though she's permanently wearing weight she can't take off. The observation deck went quiet, and then Keelan made a sound unlike anything Vector had heard from him before, a low, fragile, disbelieving moan, as though something fundamental in his worldview had just given way. "Master," he said, "I need to check something. I need to check it right now." His claws moved across his datapad with frantic urgency, pulling up Earth's planetary specifications. Not the summary that every basic xenobiology course cited, but the full environmental data, the detailed atmospheric and geological profile that almost no one ever bothered to read because the headline numbers told you everything you needed to know. Except they didn't. Earth's gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared, Keelan said slowly, his voice dropping low with every word, as though he were reading a death sentence. Yes, that is correct. That number is accurate. But, Master, look at the atmospheric pressure. Look at the oxygen concentration. Look at the radiation index from their star. Look at the weather patterns. His voice cracked completely on the last sentence. Their planet doesn't merely have predators. Their planet is a predator. Hurricanes that flatten entire cities. Earthquakes that reshape continental coastlines in minutes. Temperature variations between seasons that would be fatal to most galactic species without technology. Lightning storms. Volcanic eruptions. Floods. Blizzards. Tsunamis. He set down his datapad with trembling hands. They evolved in chaos, Master. Constant, relentless, unbroken chaos for millions of years on a world that was actively trying to kill them every single day. The observation deck was absolutely silent. The station gravity, Keelan continued, his voice now barely above a whisper. Helix 9 runs at standard galactic gravity, 6.2 meters per second squared. Vector stared at the number on his screen. She is operating, Keelan said, at 63% of her normal weight. We have been watching her fight in reduced gravity. He put down his datapad and looked at Vector with compound eyes that had lost all their earlier amusement. She is not struggling, Master. She is holding back. The silence stretched. On the arena floor below, Raina Cross accepted a water bottle from a nervous medic, took a long drink, and then looked directly up at Vector's observation window. Her voice carried perfectly through the arena's audio system, unhurried and completely conversational. "Round 2, she said. "Whenever you're ready, Arena Master. I have a dinner reservation in 3 hours, so let's try to keep this moving." The crowd, which had been building toward noise again, went silent at the sound of her voice. And then, slowly at first and then all at once, the betting boards across Helix 9 began to move in a direction they had never moved before. "The wagers are reversing," Keelan said, his voice hollow. "Everyone is pulling their money. Master, we guaranteed the odds. If she survives round 2, her initial 10,000 credit bet pays at current rates. That is approximately 8 million credits to her alone. But the institutional bets, the house guarantees, if she wins a full gauntlet, we are looking at losses that exceed 40 million credits." Vector stared at the small woman below. She had found the observation camera again. She gave it a casual wave, the way you might wave to an acquaintance across a marketplace. He felt something turn cold inside him. "Release the round 2 fighters," he said quietly. "Master," Morka said carefully. "Protocol called for 3 gladiators, sequentially." "All of them," Vector said. All 12. Simultaneously. Morka stared. Master, that violates at least a dozen Galactic Combat Commission regulations. The licensing implications alone. Release them, Vector repeated, his voice carrying a flat, hard finality that ended the conversation immediately. 12 gates opened at once. 12 Keelan warriors stepped onto the sand, 9 feet tall each, encased in full military combat armor, carrying plasma blades that hummed with barely contained energy. These were not arena novices filling a roster. These were veterans, genuine soldiers who had survived the border wars, who had held ground against enemies that most beings would not have faced at all. Their formations were precise, their movements coordinated, their intent absolutely clear. 12 against 1. Even the spectators who had shifted their bets onto Raina went quiet at the sight. Several began reversing their wagers again. Vector noted this with a grim, distant satisfaction that he couldn't quite fully feel. Raina looked at the 12 warriors spreading across the sand. She looked up at Vector's window. She shrugged. Then the Keelans attacked. Their formation was a textbook military advance. Shields interlocked, blades positioned, moving as a single armored organism across the arena floor. This was the same formation that had cracked enemy lines on 40 different worlds during the border conflicts. It was designed to be unstoppable. It was designed for opponents who responded to it the way opponents were supposed to respond, by fighting it from the front, by trying to break through or retreat from it, by engaging it on its own terms. Raina ran at the center of it. She hit the shield wall with an impact that sent a visible shockwave through the formation. The center warrior, a massive veteran named Jathar, who stood 9 feet tall and carried 400 pounds of armored muscle, stumbled backward. His shield cracked, an actual, visible crack, splitting across the face of military-grade Keelan alloy. Raina vaulted over his falling body. She landed behind the formation. What followed was not combat in any conventional sense. Keelan military doctrine was built entirely on the premise of the forward-facing armored war. It assumed an enemy who would push against it, who would try to find a way through or around it. It had no meaningful framework for an opponent who was already behind it, who moved through the warriors' ranks like water through rocks, who targeted every joint, every gap, every anatomical vulnerability with the calm, precise attention of a surgeon. She disabled the first warrior by driving her heel into his knee joint at an angle that bent it backward, the kind of structural failure that armor cannot prevent because it attacks the person inside it. He went down screaming, and she stripped his plasma blade from his hand before he finished falling. Now armed, she moved with a focus that stripped everything theatrical from her fighting. No dramatic flourishes. No wasted motion. She wasn't performing. She was working. Block, redirect, strike. Every attack targeted a specific structural weakness, every movement built on the last. She treated the warrior's superior size and mass not as a threat but as a resource, extra momentum to redirect, extra weight to weaponize, extra inertia to turn against its owner. A plasma blade caught her across the shoulder. Blood welled up dark against the torn fabric of her suit. She didn't slow. She grabbed the warrior who cut her, used his forward momentum to fold him down, and drove her stolen blade through the gap between his chest plate and his pauldron as he fell. "She's bleeding," Killerith noted, his voice carefully neutral, searching for comfort in the observation. "She doesn't care," Vector replied, and heard in his own voice something that had not been there an hour ago. "Oh," or perhaps something colder. Dread. It was true. Raina fought with the composed focus of someone doing routine maintenance, methodical, unhurried, efficient. When a Keelan blade nearly took her head off, she ducked under it, swept the warrior's legs, and used his body as a shield against incoming plasma fire from 2 of his companions. When a coordinated grab attempt came from 3 directions at once, she broke it by collapsing the geometry of it, moving through the gap that was never supposed to exist. The crowd had stopped laughing long ago. In its place, something different had taken hold, something that built slowly and then, all at once, broke through the surface like a wave. It started in the lower galleries. Quiet at first, just a handful of voices finding the same syllables. Human, human, human. It spread upward through the tiers with the unstoppable momentum of a tide coming in, growing louder with every second, until the entire arena was vibrating with it. Human, human, human. 8 minutes into round 2, 11 Keelan warriors lay scattered across the arena sand. Unconscious, incapacitated, or simply no longer willing to continue. The distinction had stopped mattering. The 12th warrior, a veteran named Crothar, who had survived the siege of Meridian and 3 border war campaigns, stood alone in the center of the arena, looked at the woman standing 5 feet away from him with blood on her face and a plasma blade in her hand, and made the most rational decision he had made in his entire military career. He dropped his weapon. He raised his hands. Raina accepted the surrender with a single nod. No theatrics. No cruelty. She walked back to the center of the arena and looked up at Vectar's window. Blood traced a slow line down her face from a cut above her eyebrow. Her left arm hung at a slightly wrong angle. Her combat suit was torn in 4 places. She breathed harder now. She was human, not a machine, and 2 rounds of combat had extracted a price. But she was standing straight, and her eyes, even from this distance, were absolutely clear. "Round 3, she called out, her voice carrying perfectly through the arena's sound system. "Bring your champion. Let's finish this." Vectar sat in his observation chair for a long moment after her words faded. The crowd was deafening. The betting boards were in chaos. Killeriz was making sounds that Vectar had never heard from a sit hand before. 300 cycles of certainty had not prepared him for this. He reached for the champion's release mechanism with hands that, for the first time in 3 centuries, were not entirely steady. "Release Gromov," he said quietly. The war drums began before the champion's gate fully opened. Deep, resonant beats that Vectar had installed specifically for Gromoth's entrance, programmed to resonate at a precise frequency that triggered primal unease in most biological species. The sound moved through the arena floor and up through the gallery supports, entering everybody in the building as a physical sensation before it ever registered as sound. The crowd, which had been loud enough to shake the station's internal structures, went quiet. Gromov the Destroyer filled his gate completely. He had to turn sideways to pass through it. 12 feet of Vraxian biology that represented the apex of what the old Empire's genetic engineers had created when they sat down to design the perfect warrior. His armored plating grew directly from his skeleton, biological alloy that had been tested against weapons that could level buildings. 4 arms, 2 upper, 2 lower, each purpose-built for a specific kind of violence. His upper forearms housed plasma cannons that had been fused with his nervous system, responding to intent rather than conscious command. His lower forearms ended in retractable blades grown from his own bone, harder than most manufactured alloys. He moved with the slow, deliberate weight of something that had never needed to be fast, because nothing had ever survived long enough to require it. 73 consecutive matches, 0 defeats. Not a single opponent who had lasted longer than 4 minutes. The crowd silence held as he entered the arena. Even the beings who had been chanting for the humans seemed to reconsider, confronted with the sheer physical reality of what they were looking at. Gromov turned his gaze toward the human standing in the center of the arena. Raina Cross looked back at him. She tilted her head slightly, the way someone does when they encounter something genuinely interesting. She studied him for a long moment, his dimensions, his movement, the way he carried his weight. Then she smiled wider than she had smiled at any point in the evening, and said something that the arena's microphones caught and broadcast every screen on Helix 9. "Finally," she said, and her voice carried something that sounded almost like relief. "Someone my size." Gromov roared. The sound hit the viewing glass hard enough to produce visible oscillations. He charged, all 4 arms raised, plasma cannons warming to firing temperature with a high-pitched whine that climbed toward pain, the ground shaking under the impact of his stride. Raina charged back. They met in the center of the arena with an impact that cracked the stone floor in a starburst pattern 3 meters in every direction. Gromoth's upper right arm swung down, plasma cannon firing at point-blank range, a burst of superheated energy that would have reduced most opponents to a rapidly cooling problem. Raina twisted at the last possible instant, the blast passing close enough to her head that the superheated air scorched a path through her dark hair. She grabbed his lower left arm, the one ending in the bone blade, and used it as a handhold. She pulled herself up his massive body, moving with a quick, determined efficiency that had nothing elegant about it, just pure functional purpose. "That is not a recognized combat technique," Morka said weakly from somewhere behind Vectar. "Nothing about this evening has been recognized," Vectar replied, his voice hollow. Gromov tried to shake her off. He reversed 1 plasma cannon. tried to bring it to bear on the creature clinging to his upper back. Raina locked her legs around his shoulder joint and drove her elbow into the gap between his helmet and his armor collar, once, hard and precise. Twice. 3 times. The armor gap wasn't a weakness in any normal sense. Against most weapons, against most opponents, it simply didn't matter. But Raina was not attacking the armor. She was attacking the anatomy beneath it, targeting the nerve cluster that sat exactly where 3 centuries of arena combat had taught Vector's staff it sat, in precisely the location that even Vraxian bioarmor left accessible. The armor cracked. Gromoth grabbed her with his lower right arm and threw her. The throw carried the full force of a creature who weighed 800 pounds of armored muscle, and it translated Raina Cross across the full diameter of the arena before she hit the far wall. The impact left a crater in the reinforced stone. 30,000 credits of structural repair, Vector thought distantly. At minimum. The crowd's cheering cut off so abruptly it felt like a physical change in air pressure. For a moment, the arena held its collective breath. Raina lay still. Finally, Vector breathed, closing all 4 of his eyes for a single moment of profound relief. Finally, it is... Raina stood up, slowly, deliberately, using the wall behind her for initial leverage, then rising to her full height on her own power. Blood ran from a cut above her eye that hadn't been there a moment ago. Her left arm hung at an angle that made Vector's stomach turn, dislocated, visibly, completely, the joint clearly no longer where it was supposed to be. She reached across her body with her right hand, gripped her left shoulder, and pulled. The joint reset with a pop that the nearest arena microphones captured and broadcast in full fidelity. Half the audience looked away. A significant fraction of them made sounds. Raina spat blood onto the sand. She looked at Gromoth across the length of the arena. She looked at him the way someone looks at a problem they've been turning over in their mind and have finally decided how to solve. "Okay," she said. Her voice was quiet, but the microphones carried it everywhere. She said it again, with a different quality in it, less observation, more decision. "Okay, now I'm annoyed." What followed was not a fight in any sense that Vector could map onto his 3 centuries of experience. It was a systematic, methodical, furiously efficient dismantling of a creature that had never been defeated in his life. Raina stopped holding back. The difference was immediately, viscerally apparent. She moved at a speed that stopped being explainable and started being simply astonishing, not superhuman by the standards of faster galactic species, but absolutely incompatible with everything the xenobiology database said should be possible for a human operating in standard gravity. She was using Gromoth's size against him with a precision that suggested she had spent the first 2 rounds and the brief interval of her collision with the wall mapping every significant weakness in his biology and deciding exactly what to do about each one. When his plasma cannons fired, she was already elsewhere. When his blade struck, they found empty air. She climbed him a second time, faster, taking a different route that bypassed the reach of his lower arms entirely. She wrapped her arm around his throat from behind, a position that his forearm could not easily reach, and she squeezed. Vraxian throat structures were engineered to withstand pressures that could collapse industrial machinery. This was documented. This was tested. This was one of the reasons Gromoth had never needed to worry about being choked in 73 consecutive fights. Raina squeezed anyway. Gromoth slammed backward into the arena wall, trying to crush her between his body and the stone. The wall gave before she did, a second impact crater joining the first, thus billowing outward, the galleries above that section briefly going silent as spectators felt the vibration in their seats. She held on. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Gromoth's roar dropped from a weapon to a sound, and then from a sound to a wheeze. His forearms slowed their flailing. His plasma cannons fired twice more, both times into empty air, and then fell silent as his concentration fragmented. 4 to 5 seconds. The champion fell. He went forward, face first, into the sand, and the impact sent a tremor through the arena floor that Vector felt in the soles of his feet 3 levels above the pit. Raina released her hold and stepped off his back. She stood over him as he lay motionless, swaying slightly, bleeding from more cuts than Vector had stopped counting, her combat chute scorched and torn beyond any recognizable utility. But standing. The arena exploded. 3,000 beings on their feet simultaneously, the sound crashing against the observation deck like a physical force. The charm from earlier returned, but it had transformed. It wasn't tentative now, wasn't surprised or questioning. It was a full-throated roar of collective disbelief converted into pure exhilaration. Human! 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 Vector sat in his chair and could not move. He looked at his champion lying motionless on the sand. He looked at the cracked floor, the cracked walls, the chaos on his betting boards, the frozen expression on Kilaritha's face. He looked at the ruin of everything he had spent 3 centuries building, the certainty, the reputation, the unbroken record, the legend. Then he looked at Raina Cross. She found the observation camera one more time. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just looked at it for a moment, directly and steadily, the way you look at something you've been trying to explain for a long time after you finally managed to make it understood. Then she nodded. Message received. The aftermath unfolded with the slow, inexorable completeness of a structural collapse that had been building for hours before anyone noticed the cracks. Killarith fell first. Literally, his 6 legs giving out as a final accounting appeared on his datapad. Station Helix 9's entertainment budget was gone. The arena's operational reserves were gone. Vector's personal savings, accumulated across 3 centuries of careful financial management, were gone. All of it transferred, along with dozens of other payouts to spectators who had reversed their bets in the last possible window, into accounts across 7 systems. Into one account in particular, belonging to one Commander Raina Cross, to the combined total of 73 million credits. The Galactic Combat Commission representatives arrived within the hour, their expressions carrying the specific professional neutrality of officials who have already decided what they think and are simply going through the procedural motions of confirming it. Releasing 12 gladiators simultaneously and deploying the champion outside authorized round parameters had violated 41 separate combat regulations. Vector's arena license was suspended pending full review. The review, everyone understood, was a formality. The Crimson Gauntlet was finished. 300 years. Gone. And then came the interview, which was the part that truly broke him. Raina had waved off the medical team again, accepted water, declined everything else. She was sitting on an equipment crate near the contestants' gate when Sycamora, an ambitious young trail journalist from the Galactic Sports Network, pushed through the post-match chaos with a camera drone hovering at shoulder height. Commander Cross. The journalist's antennae were vibrating with barely contained excitement. That was the most extraordinary display of combat capability this reporter has ever witnessed in 15 years of covering the gauntlet. What training regimen produced this? What enhancement protocols did you undergo? What genetic modifications? Standard Earth military training, Raina said, drinking from her water bottle. 20 weeks basic. Ranger qualification course, another 8 weeks. Special operations certification after that. Nothing out of the ordinary. Sycamora's antenna went very still. But the strength, the speed, the tolerance for injury, surely some form of biological enhancement. Nope. Raina set down her water bottle and looked at the journalist with the patient expression of someone who has explained something many times and accepted that they will explain it many more. I'm about average for a human soldier, honestly. Maybe slightly above average in hand-to-hand. I always tested well in that. But nothing remarkable. There are at least 10,000 active duty service members back home who could have done exactly what I did here tonight. Probably better. She paused. My close-quarters combat instructor from basic training would be genuinely embarrassed by how long round 3 took. She would have been very direct about that. The silence that followed lasted long enough to become uncomfortable. But Sycamora said slowly, the database. Every xenobiological record states that humans are fragile, weak, poorly adapted for. About those databases, Raina said. Her tone didn't change. Still conversational, still almost friendly, the way you discuss a minor administrative error. Who exactly wrote them? Because I'm genuinely curious. Because whoever did it clearly never visited Earth, never met an actual human in a non-diplomatic context, and never thought very carefully about what kind of environment produces what kind of species. She stood up, testing her shoulder, rotating it carefully. Our planet has apex predators that weigh 2 tons and can sustain 30 miles per hour for distances that would exhaust most pursuit vehicles. We have weather systems that generate wind speeds capable of leveling cities. Our geological activity reshapes coastlines in hours. Our star produces radiation levels that require our bodies to run continuous cellular repair processes. We have seasonal temperature variations that would be fatal to most species without significant technological mediation. She picked up her water bottle again. Earth doesn't just have a dangerous ecosystem. Earth is a dangerous ecosystem. It has been trying to kill everything that lives on it for 4 billion years. We adapted. We got very, very good at not dying. She glanced up at the observation window one last time. Also, and I want to make sure this part gets into your report, because I think it's important, your station gravity is 6.2 meters per second squared. Earth's surface gravity is 9.8. That means I spent this entire evening fighting at roughly 60% of my normal body weight. She tilted her head. It was like sparring in a swimming pool. Everything felt slow. Everything felt light. She paused one more beat. I was genuinely holding back through most of round 3. I didn't want to kill anyone. I'm not here to kill anyone. I was just here to see if your odds were accurate. She picked up her jacket from the equipment crate. They weren't. 3 days later, Vector stood alone in the empty arena. The galleries were silent. The sand had been raked clean of blood and debris, which seemed almost offensive in its thoroughness, as if the surface could be restored to something neutral after what it had witnessed. The champion's gate stood open at the far end, Gromoth gone, recovering in a medical facility that Vector now knew existed and functioned, because he had paid the invoice for it. 60%. She had destroyed his champion, his arena, his legacy, and his financial future while operating at 60% of a normal physical capacity. Vector stood in the silence and tried to assemble a framework that could contain this fact, and found that none of his 3 centuries of experience had prepared him with the right tools. He had spent 300 years understanding combat, understanding warriors, understanding the hierarchy of species in this galaxy, who was strong, who was weak, who was built for violence, and who was not. He had been so certain of it that the certainty itself had become invisible, had become the water he swam in, the ground beneath his feet. He had been wrong. Not slightly wrong. Not directionally wrong. Catastrophically, completely, structurally wrong. Wrong about everything. Wrong from the beginning. Out there, somewhere in the expanding network of jump lanes and trade corridors that connected the galaxy's inhabited systems to one another, was a planet called Earth. A small, chaotic, relentlessly hostile planet that had spent millions of years producing an animal that was stronger than it looked, faster than the databases recorded, and capable of adapting to almost anything the universe chose to throw at it. And according to every updated record of the Galactic Sports Network and 17 independent xenobiology institutes had rushed to publish in the 72 hours since the match, humanity was expanding outward. Slowly but steadily, the way things expand when they have nowhere to be but everywhere. Vector thought about the beings across 7 systems who were currently revising their understanding of human capability. He thought about the military strategists, the diplomatic corps, the traders and station commanders and arena operators who had all been operating on the same bad data, the same comfortable certainty, the same unexamined assumption that the galaxy's hierarchy was exactly what it appeared to be. He thought about Raina Cross, who had boarded a commercial transport 6 hours after the match with 73 million credits and no luggage beyond what she'd arrived with, and had gone home to a planet that had been quietly producing people like her for as long as anyone cared to record. He thought about what she had said in the interview, the part that had stayed with him most clearly, that he kept returning to in the silence of the empty arena. There are at least 10,000 active duty service members who could have done exactly what I did here tonight. Probably better. 10,000. Vector looked up at the cracked arena ceiling, at the observation window above it, at the empty chair where he had sat for 300 cycles watching certainty confirm itself match after match after match. "We're going to need bigger arenas," he said to the empty air, his voice quiet and sardonic, and carrying the specific bitter humor of someone who has just understood a very expensive joke at their own expense. He stood there a moment longer, turning the thought over. Or perhaps, he added softly, no arenas at all. Perhaps what they needed was something that had never been on Helix 9 construction plans. An apology, and the wisdom to make it before the humans decided they weren't interested in receiving one. The Crimson Gauntlet's license was permanently revoked 41 days later. The arena floor with its starburst crack pattern and twin impact craters, was preserved as an exhibit by the newly established Galactic Xenobiology Reassessment Institute, which opened its doors the following cycle with a significant grant from an anonymous donor. The donor's transfer originated from an account registered to Raina Cross, Earth. She had, apparently, enjoyed herself. The Crimson Gauntlet had one rule: carved into the obsidian archway above its entrance in 7 languages, burned into the consciousness of every fighter, spectator, and bookkeeper who had ever set foot on Station Helix 9. Everyone falls before Gromoth the Destroyer. Everyone. No exceptions. No negotiations. No miracles. But when the human looked up at the observation cameras and said, quiet as a blade sliding from its sheath, "Bring your champion," the entire arena forgot how to breathe. Vectar had presided over the Crimson Gauntlet for 300 cycles. 3 centuries of blood, glory, broken bones, and shattered records. In all that time, across 4,723 matches fought on the sand of Helix 9's legendary arena floor, he had never once been wrong about a fighter's survival odds. Not once. His 4 eyes were instruments of precision, honed by centuries of observation. He could assess a warrior's capabilities within moments of their arrival, the economy of their movement, the confidence embedded in their posture, the language written in their scars. Every fighter told a story before they ever threw a punch. Vectar simply knew how to read them. And right now, standing in his elevated observation bay and looking down through the reinforced glass of the human in the preparation chamber below, the story he was reading was a comedy. The woman was small, laughably, almost insultingly small. Commander Raina Cross, the name listed on the registration manifest, stood barely 6 feet tall. Her frame looked almost fragile compared to the average Keelan warrior, who typically stood 9 feet of layered muscle and chain plating. She wore a simple black combat suit with no armor reinforcement, no visible enhancement gear, and no weapons beyond a standard plasma knife clipped casually to her hip, as if it were an afterthought. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight, no-nonsense knot, and her face, sharp-featured, pale, utterly still, wore an expression that Vectar could only describe as bored. She looked like a woman waiting for delayed transport, not someone about to enter the most dangerous arena in 7-star systems. This is a human. Morcus, Vectar's young trail assistant, pressed his face against the observation window, his wide compound eyes cycling through shades of amber amusement. "Master, surely this is some administrative error. She looks like she would shatter if I sneeze in her direction." The rest of the arena staff crowded around the window, pointing, chittering, making crude gestures. Crude jokes passed between them like currency, each one sharper than the last. Vectar allowed it. Morale was important. And honestly, what harm could a little mockery do? The human would be dead within minutes of round 1 anyway. She would join a very short, very consistent list. 3 humans had entered the Crimson Gauntlet before her. 3 humans had died in round 1. The statistics were not merely a pattern. They were a law of the universe, as reliable as orbital mechanics. Humans were weak, slow, biologically underwhelming in almost every measurable way. Their home world, a backwater planet called Earth, had embarrassingly low gravity. They had no natural weapons, no armor plating, no venom sacs, no regenerative tissue. Their senses were mediocre. Their bones were fragile. They were, by every xenobiological metric that mattered, the galaxy's cosmic joke, soft-bodied creatures who had somehow stumbled into faster-than-light travel despite having no business leaving the gentle, forgiving cradle of their little world. Vectar activated the arena communication channel. His voice was deep, resonant, and carrying the full weight of 3 centuries of authority as it boomed through the preparation bay speakers. "Human, I am Arena Master Vectar. I have presided over 4,723 matches on this floor. I have watched champions rise from nothing and pretenders crumble into dust. I tell you this now, not as a threat, not as cruelty, but as a professional courtesy earned through 300 years of experience. No human has survived round 1 of the Crimson Gauntlet. Not one, not ever." He expected fear, perhaps a trembling lip, maybe a desperate plea to withdraw the registration. It happened more often than people imagined. Warriors who seemed confident in the preparation bay suddenly rediscovering their survival instincts once reality set in. Raina Cross looked directly at the observation camera. Her expression didn't flicker. Her eyes were dark and steady and completely, unsettlingly calm. "Watch me," she said. 2 words. That was all she gave him. Morcus erupted into laughter so violent he nearly knocked himself off his perch, and the rest of the staff joined in immediately, the observation deck dissolving into gleeful chaos. Even Vector felt his mandibles twitch upward in something approaching genuine amusement. The audacity was almost charming, in the way that a child's confident boast before losing a foot race was charming. Endearing, even. "Very well," Vector announced, switching to the station-wide channel, his voice carrying to every corner of Helix 9. "All wagers are now open. Current odds for human survival past round 1 are set at 3,000 to 1. Place your bets, beings of Helix 9. Tonight, witness another chapter in humanity's continuing failure to understand its place in this galaxy." The betting boards exploded to life across every screen on the station. Credits poured in from every direction. From the merchant quarters, from the military observation lounges, from the luxury boxes where wealthy visitors from the outer systems reclined with refreshments and watched the boards with lazy interest. 7 systems, 18 trading hubs, and dozens of independent stations sent wagers flooding in, all of them pointing the same direction. Against the human. All of them. All of them. That is, except one. Raina Cross had placed 10,000 credits on herself. Vector saw that notification appear on his secondary display and laughed until his thorax ached. The human was not merely outmatched. She was delusional.